what I want to do is, as a person, as a reader and a writer, right, we are always thinking. And there's all different ways to think. So I already taught you, sometimes when you read, you think about questions you have. Sometimes when you read, you think about the kind of person the character is, and that's fine and dandy, right? But what we have to start doing is we have to start thinking deeper, okay? And I know I already did this with a couple of you, a small group, so you guys just bear with me. So when we're talking about thinking deeper, right? Did you ever hear the expression, oh, you have to think outside the box? Like, companies are not going to hire people who cannot think outside the box. Or you know how we say, not all inferences are created equally? All right? So when you think deeper, it means you're not thinking about the obvious, right? But there's things that teachers can do and things that they can teach to get you to think this way, all right? Actually, no, nobody in my class did this one. So one way you can think is what you call, this little thing, it's called language of the disciplines. Does anybody know what a discipline is? Google it right now, discipline. But it's not punishment, it's not that one. So what does discipline mean? So go ahead and Google it.
Or university level.
All right, so when we're talking about discipline, we're talking about, what did you say? A unit of study? A branch of knowledge? Okay, so like a unit of study. It's a particular branch. So what disciplines are you taught in middle school? You have language arts. What's another discipline that's taught? Math. Science. Social studies. Okay, so these are all disciplines. Now, off of the Google, when you are in that discipline, you have to talk like the person of that discipline. So in other words, you have to talk the talk. So if you are a scientist, you have to talk the talk of a scientist, right? Like if you ask me some science terminology, I would have no idea, okay? Like if you ask me math terminology, remember I told you that one time my son had to do factor trees, and I don't remember, I had to Google it. So as a language arts person, so you're a reader and a writer, you have to talk the talk of a language arts person. You have to talk the talk of a reader, talk the talk of a writer. So what I noticed, the reason I'm doing this is because what I noticed in my small groups, the same stuff kept coming up over and over. So instead of me teaching it to 3 different groups 3 separate times, I'm just going to teach 2 as a whole. So there's certain languages, yeah.
Did you say you're recording it? Is that the one that you
Yes.
put on your website?
Yes. So there are certain languages that we, as a reader and a writer, need to. Just gives me more proof for parents, right? All right. So when we're talking about language of disciplines, when reading your books, there's certain things that kept coming up over and over and over. All right. Now some of these things, you know. Okay, so one of the things, so what I want you to do is on your little Google Docs note page, you're going to write this down, okay? So, not this. We already did this, okay? So, one of the terms is personification, okay? This kept coming up in your books over and over and over again, and a lot of you didn't really recognize it, and a lot of you didn't really understand what it meant. So we as readers and writers, we need to understand this. And when we see one of these types of writing crafts, so you should be writing this down, writing crafts, you have to be able to say to me, oh my gosh, this is such awesome personification, it really shows this. So you have to be able to talk like a reader, like a writer. So personification, and I know some of you already know this, is when you give human traits, qualities, feelings, actions to non-living objects, okay? So go ahead and write that definition down, and I'm going to show you some examples. Write down the definition. So an example is, there's this doctor, and not only is he a doctor, but he also writes. So he wrote this essay, and it's all about surgery. And in this essay, this is what he wrote. He wrote this. He wrote, "The operation is over. On the table, the knife lies spent. So spent means you're tired, you can't go on anymore. On its side. The bloody meal smear dried upon its flanks. The knife rests and waits. And I heard someone say, ooh, that's good because this is good writing because it's supposed to get reactions. So when you think about, can a knife like knives don't wait. Who waits? People wait. Okay? Knives don't rest, people rest. Knives are not spent, so exhausted. So this is a perfect example of personification. So write down this example. Okay? Another one, so this wasn't an essay. The other one, I don't know if anybody likes, or you guys are too young for it, Green Day. There's a song, and it says, time grabs you by the wrist, directs you where to go. So does time literally grab you? No. Okay? So this would be an example of personification. In your novels, you definitely have personification. But I'm not sure if you understand what it means or even why it's being used. So we're going to discuss that later. So go ahead and write down these examples. So besides another language of the discipline of language arts, reading and writing, is, I don't know why it's not letting me go. Turn. Oh, can somebody exit? Go to the next one.
Oh, it goes on.
Now, I know you guys know what similes are because I've heard you, but you know, there's a difference. When you're in middle school, the similes get a lot more complicated, a lot more difficult to understand. So when you take notes on this, remember, be brief. So basically, when you have a simile, you compare two things that are alike in a certain way. All right? And they use like or as. So in the Katy Perry song, she says, do you ever feel like a plastic bag drifting through the wind? That is a simile, waiting to start again. In the Hunger Games, the author writes, my legs, arms, torso, underarms, and parts of my eyebrows have been stripped off the stuff, leaving me like a plucked bird ready for roasting. So you should be writing this down. Oh, sorry, Katy Perry. So you're going to see this language because if you think about it, before songs, in order for somebody to sing a song, somebody had to write that song. So writing is part of the discipline of language arts. You know, obviously books, an author is, you know, part of the whole language arts discipline. Does anybody know of any other songs that contain similes? The next language in this discipline of a reader and a writer is metaphors, which you know. And basically a metaphor is you're comparing two things that are not alike. All right? And you're not using like or as. So in the song by Katy Perry, because baby, you're a firework, you're comparing somebody to a firework. But you have to understand what that means. Okay, in the Hunger Games, Katniss, the girl was on fire. She literally was not on fire. There are some what? Well, not in this part where this writing was. Not in this particular part. Now, what you have to understand is some metaphors are really long. Like, I know there was one in Stargirl. I don't remember the one with the skull. Remember, guys? My Stargirl people? Yeah. Okay. So there could be a metaphor where they talk about this one object, right? So, for example, in Stargirl, they talk about how this animal tried to survive, but the animal couldn't survive, so the animal gave in. So what was really going on is that was really a metaphor for Stargirl. So as you read more complicated books, this language of the discipline, this type of writing crafts are going to get much more complicated. So, like, you might have, because Stargirl is like, it's a higher level, it's going to have much more complicated metaphors and similes and personification, say, than Loser, which is like a little lower lexile. Okay, so the harder books you read, the more complicated this language is going to get. Okay, The next type of language that readers and writers use, it's called a hyperbole. Now this is one I am sure you have not heard of before. Basically, a hyperbole, it's not a hyperbole, it's a hyperbole, is basically an extreme exaggeration used. I mean, if you look at the Greek word, it comes from the word that means excess. So in Hunger Games, there's this one part where it says attendance is mandatory unless you are in death's door. Okay, so in other words, you're going to die. Like, that's a total exaggeration. Okay, the money ran out and we were slowly starving to death. Okay, at this point in Hunger Games, they were not literally starving to death. Okay, like when you guys say, I'm starving to death, like you're not. You're just saying that to show somebody how hungry you are. All right? So hyperbole. How many of you have heard of this? Good, you're learning something totally new. So you guys use hyperboles, like especially little children, like, oh my God, I've been sitting here, Mom, waiting for you for 3 hours. Well, that's an extreme exaggeration. All right? This is called anaphora. So it's basically the deliberate repetition of a word or phrase at the beginning of several verses or clauses or paragraphs. So, for example, like run, 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 little piggies. All right, 3 blind mice, 3 blind mice. So those are like little nursery rhymes, right? But the next one was from a speech, like now is the time for action. Now is the time to take up arms. Now is the time to fight for your country. I think some of you in the past, you might have used this in your personal narrative, but we never really named it. How many of you think you read this type of language or this technique being used in your novels? Like, you would know it. Because, like, there are some authors that use it more than others. Like, for example, anybody here read Hatchet?
Yeah.
Okay, there is a ton of this in Hatchet. Okay? Here, I actually want you to get rid of this one. Okay? All right. So when we're talking about you're repeating of a word or phrase, the beginning of several verses or several sentences, all right, or paragraphs. This is something else. This is a bad example. So like 3 blind mice, this is in the first sentence. This is in the second sentence. Now is the time. First sentence. Now is the time. Second sentence. Now is the time. Third sentence. Just press OK. All right. So now make sure in your notes that you have the language that's being used, or we're going to call them the writing craft. Make sure you have the definition, and make sure you have some examples, because you're going to need these in order to do the rest of the exercises, okay?